maybe rooting for Russians sounds a little over the top, but it is true that outside of NATO's countries, enclaves, these so-called democracies, Western democracies, and their sycophants in Africa, Asia, South America, Middle East, that things are seen quite a bit differently. And if people aren't openly rooting for Russia, which actually some are, but lots and lots of people understand the position that NATO has put Russia in. Does that mean that, billions of people have no humanity? Of course not. That's kind of ridiculous and insulting to say so. And they all express support for the people in a war zone. Cuba and China pledged support to help civilians when it becomes possible and necessary. The bulk of the blame, though, they feel is to be laid at the door of NATO and specifically its U.S. trainers, because they are the ones that started this whole thing. Not only from the inception of NATO, the whole concept was from out of the ashes of earlier attempts like the MLF, the multilateral force, or basically the fruition of the On to Moscow chorus. And the quip was as poignant now as it was then, that the point of NATO was to keep the Americans in, the Russians out, and the Germans down. And except for the out-and-out Nazis that they recruited to help run the thing, that is still generally true today. And the other thing that really bothers people is that their concerns are dismissed. There's this concept of whataboutism. Any context or history, any perspective other than this dominant narrative that people are being asked to swallow, that are being spoon-fed, is irrelevant, it's in the way, it's inconvenient, and these are, in general, people across the global south who for hundreds of years, literally, have been saying, what about? What about us? What about us? Why don't we count? Why don't our interests matter? Why are our needs and our fears and our angers disrespected? And you can see this now in the coverage of the conflict, the really, really openly racist crap that comes out of Western reporters' mouths about how they're just devastated, brought to tears because they're seeing this happen in Europe to blonde, blue-eyed people. This is not Afghanistan. This is not Syria. Right? This isn't Yemen. Right, because we're bombing people right now in Yemen, but I guess they don't count at all. What about them? Nah, no problem. So that touches a nerve, and when the Russians say, and others repeat, that their security concerns were never taken into account, and that is the basis of this conflict, they feel it. It resonates with people across the rest of the world, outside of the bubble. So it's easy to just dismiss anything that goes against this narrative because the information blockade is so complete and so powerful and so over the top that it's just nauseating. I mean, anyone, seriously, anyone with any intellectual integrity cannot look at this and see how over the top it is, how out of balance it is, how hypocritical it is when you look at it in the context of history. But people outside of Europe and in the United States from these communities and within Europe from these communities are just shake their heads in disgust at this, you know, the blonde, blue-eyed trope, at the very idea. It stands to, it really needs to be said that many people don't even accept the basic premise of the Western narrative, that is that Russia is the aggressor. They see that history. What about us? They see that history, that this war started at the very least in 2014, and that while this may be a new salvo, the Russians didn't start anything. And there are millions of people who agree with this perspective, and it's being slowly just choked out of the news feed on Western TVs and in Western minds. You know, that's why you see I Stand With Russia trending in India today, and why you can't get a majority in the UN General Assembly, even with all the tiny little micro nations and microstates that are basically on the U.S. payroll, because it's too much. People heard the excuses that were made when NATO completely destroyed Libya. They saw the glibness with which U.S. and Western reporters reacted when Muammar Gaddafi was sodomized with a bayonet, or Saddam Hussein, a brown man, was lynched live on live television. And the cackle of the West, embodied by Hillary Clinton's "We came, we saw, he died." That's representation, that's a reflection of what happens to them and their countries and their people over and over again in this 500-year history. And if they had any, lack of connection, the Westerners make it all the time. Lindsey Graham saying today, calling on somebody, anybody, to take out Putin, right? A call for assassination. He may be a whack job, but he's a very famous whack job. This is one of the leading lights of the other party in power in the United States. And there's not, people don't even blink an eye. You have Schultz, the German chancellor, who scoffs at the idea that the Russians in Donbass could be subjected with anything like genocide, as if that's completely impossible, says a German federal chancellor to Russia. And non-Europeans feel this. What? I mean, how, and by the way, the same thing is happening right now. I have reports from Kharkov of these, dead-ender Azov or neo-Nazi battalions just blowing up buildings, destroying Kharkov, this beautiful city, destroying it block by block to blame the Russians and to get their revenge before they're completely encircled. There's nothing they can do. But Ukrainians feel like shark bait, that they are placed to goad the Russians. And the Russians took the bait. That's one strategic win for the West. They're also winning on the TR front for now, but they have to, because the rest of humanity is waiting in the wings. And this is a very serious thing. That's why people have to decide which side they're on. Because once there is any inkling at all that it's even feasible to punch NATO in the face and get away with it, push back on the ruiner of countries, at the empire of lies, to coin a phrase, then the whole thing can just crumble in a fortnight. And that is something they cannot allow to happen.